There's something weird about this rock that, even though you're looking at it, I'm willing to bet you can't tell what makes this particular rock weird. There's also this window, which you probably have never even stopped and thought about whether this window works. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. And lastly, there's this ship, which you might assume is Ultron's ship, and if you've played on this map, you probably know that you spawn within Ultron's ship and then take a teleporter to the rest of the map, but that's actually not the case. While game design is designed to be what is effectively functional art, the functional art that's going on here is far more extensive. For example, this section here is the section that you spawn in, not the area that you would assume. And in fact, the area hidden over here is out of sight by a thin mountain, what is effectively a blanket thrown over the top of a developer's decision in order to better sell you on the illusion. There are lots of little tricks like this within Marvel Rivals in order to give you the feel of being in one of these maps. But the thing that makes this odd, such as all of the things that we saw at the start, is that the decisions that are made here leads me to believe that this team that made this map is different than the teams that have made other maps in the game. We're going to examine all of the brushstrokes of the designers and artists that have created Marvel Rivals, and we're going to start here by examining each of the different sections within the Krakoa map, starting right here at the spawn room. This dog, this wolf, whatever you want to call him, is named Logan. And I know that this dog's name is Logan because this is Psylocke's room. You can notice that there is a sword, one of her katanas, planted into the center here with one of her butterflies rested along the top. If we look at the top here, we can assume the light that's coming in from this tree above is natural light pouring into the rest of the room, but it's not. In fact, if we take our camera up here, we can realize that this area is just, well, it's all closed in and the light in here is coming from nowhere. The windows, something that we saw at the start of this video, are also fake too. They're what are effectively paintings. And what makes this more interesting is that these windows are inconsistent. Like often on the other sides, there's nothing, but sometimes there is. And that's only when the player is able to see it, meaning that each of these windows had to be placed by hand. And somebody made the decision to cut corners, understandably, because no one's going to see this, where the players couldn't see them. There's much more to be explored here within the Krakoa maps, even within just this first area. Quite a lot, in fact. Lots of amazing and beautiful details that we completely skip over. I think we often forget that the maps that were given and all of the surrounding areas and outside, for how beautiful they are, were not created procedurally or by accident. A person had to make a decision and model each and every one of these in order to sell this illusion to us players, in order to allow us to feel special about this, which I find incredible because there's so much here that we'll just completely gloss over. And some of it is a bit of a shame, such as this Emma Frost statue. Have you ever, honestly, ever seen this Emma Frost statue? Or this Storm statue? Or let me up the stakes a little bit and talk about this Professor X statue. Now, while this map is new, I've played on it at least a dozen times, and never once have I been to this side of the map and realized that we have the entire model for Professor X already in the game. This is like the developers themselves leaking what Professor X is going to look like to the rest of us, and I've never even noticed it. There's other fun things in here too, such as this tree, which is for some reason hollow. I don't know why. And then we can, when we push our camera into the floor, begin to get a better picture of the different team that's involved here. And the other video that we've done on this, which, by the way, if you enjoy this video, of course, let me know with a sub, a like, and leave a comment as to which map you want to see done, or something that you love about this exploration. There's lots of cool stuff to appreciate here for the art team. But one of the things that we saw in the previous videos is that the area underneath the map was a void. It was just completely empty, just darkness with a couple things sticking into the ground. Whereas in this area, it's a lot of these walls protruding or extruding further into the ground, which leads me to believe that the techniques that were used here were different. And like I said, what I think to be a different team that's involved. Jumping into the next map, I fully expected this portion of the map to be basically underground and entirely smoke and mirrors. And while there's a lot of smoke and mirrors here, a lot of it was done legitimately, I guess you could say. For example, the tree that's above us is, again, fully modeled. Now, it's low res because the players are always going to be very far from it, but this is a very real thing. This isn't just a part of the skybox, including the area that's surrounding, including this really good-looking beach. Wow, this beach looks amazing. There's lots of small things here like fruit that nobody will see, and strangely, this map in particular, well, most of the Krakoa maps, but this one especially, has some flaws with the spectator cam. There are invisible boundary boxes that keep the spectator cam within particular areas, and the boundary box for this map is actually too high. If I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to touch my camera to Jeff the Landshark if he was standing still on the lowest point of the map because of how the way this area is designed, which is a little bit odd. Also, we mentioned at the start of this video that there's Ultron's ship on top of the rocks and other stuff that we saw, and let's examine this a little bit further. We can take our camera, because this is an area that players can explore, all the way out to the furthest reaches of this map. And while we're given the impression that this zone right here, this tower, this monolith, is supposed to be Ultron's loading spot, that's actually, again, not the case. We can see that this area over here is the spawn room for the players. And when we actually take our camera inside, we can see how thorough of an illusion or trick or a design decision this is in order to sell that this thing is flying through the sky. Because when you look on the sides, you can see that there's a thin fog among a massive swath of space out here. And then if you look forward, which normally, because we know how this area is on the outside, would be looking into, well, rock, this is actually on the inside designed to look like we're flying forward and into more sky. But of course, if we push the camera through, there's nothing there. It's just rock, which again, I think is really neat. But then we move into the last portion of the Krakoa map, the map that is by far the largest in terms of the area that we can explore. We first spawn in looking at these big pearlescent crystals, which, as pretty as they are, I'm always so focused in on the mission that I've actually never stopped and looked at them, which they're really cool. I really like how this looks, and they're really imposing on the rest of the map by their sheer size. We can also dip our camera pretty far down into this map and see the edge of the water, where obviously the developers never expected anyone to see, but it's kind of cool to get to see the seams, get to see the edges of the page, as it were, down here. Bringing our camera lower down, we can see that the doors are stuck down here, something that we explored in the previous video. And we also can see these low poly cans, like all of the amenities that are around this area are all very low poly. They're all very octagonal, which again, makes sense, as you know, it's supposed to be optimizing as much as we can. We don't need these things to really realistically be cans. We're not ever going to interact with them other than just smashing through them, but it's kind of fun to see where the illusion is sort of ending. There's also, if we bring our camera underneath here, we can see these light domes, which this map makes pretty heavy use of. These little areas of volumetric light that are designed to sell the idea of warmth within this map that are actually just placed there by hand. In one of the previous videos, we looked at lonely health packs, and this health pack is possibly the most useful lonely health pack. A health pack I'm not familiar with at all, despite me playing this map again at least a dozen times, is right off the beaten path from the main zone. Now, you'll need some character that's relatively quick, but it's pretty helpful to know that there's a health pack right over here if needs be. But let's take a quick pause and look at the gala celebration down below, something that kind of looks like the initial loading screen here. When we look down here, there's a lot of detail here, but there's also not a lot of detail. Well, let me explain. We can actually take our camera down into this zone, quite far in fact, and all of the people down here are two-dimensional, designed to give the illusion that everything here is lively, of course, but none of the people here are modeled at all. They're not even like a glob or what is effectively a statue. They're just pieces of paper designed to always point towards the player's camera. But it is a little odd to see this down here. In fact, we can push our camera further into this other space of volumetric lights that are blindingly bright. Again, the developers clearly never intended us to be in this side of the map. But as I continue to go further and further back, exploring as far as I possibly could to try to find the limit of what I was allowed to do, I saw this. Do you see it? This is a two-dimensional tree. Everything I have seen in Marvel Rivals up to this point, save for plant foliage and such, has all been 3D modeled. But big structures such as this, always 3D, never 2D. This is the first time, and it won't be the last time we'll see in this video, of them making use of a two-dimensional asset in order to sell the idea of three-dimensional space, whether it be for time constraints or optimization reasons. This is really cool to me because this is such an obvious decision for something that a player will never find reasonably, like not normally, not unless you're a weirdo like me who likes to explore and examine and enjoy fun details. Let's take a quick detour and take a look at the dragon in this area, which is surprisingly not that interesting. The dragon is just exactly what you'd expect with no real tricks or anything else going on. If we go to the other side of the map, we realize that this is actually the party poopers side of the map, where there's not a lot of gala things happening. Never something I ever really noticed, because again, I'm so locked out of the mission that I've never even taken the time to stop. If we bring our camera under the ground again, we can see that there's more extrusions, more of these big cylinders that are jutted into the ground here, as opposed to just simply cutting it off and letting it be a void, which again, I believe betrays that this is a different technique that was used here. Also, you might notice a distinct lack of ominous random orbs, something we saw in the previous video. But what you will see in this is something that we saw in the previous Gala maps and the previous Krakoa maps, is a statue, this one of Magneto, on both sides of the map, which is pretty cool. And it seems to be exactly on model, which I think is neat. It's a good use of resources. So we can move our camera over here to these fireworks, which is above the gala, and even though I have my game paused here, these are fully functional. These are strangely not two-dimensional. This would, I would believe, make the most sense to be two-dimensional, but they're not. For some reason, these are all existing in a three-dimensional space. But we have one other side of the map to explore, and that's the alternate spawn room, because again, the portal area is so vastly spread out, we can actually push our cameras all the way out here. Now, as I was going over here, I didn't notice anything odd. I explored around in the area a little bit, and again, more dark spaces that the developers never intended for us to see. But as I was on my way back, did you see it? That rock is not only two-dimensional, but it's one-sided, which means that the developers wanted to again save resources and time, etc. But more than that, they only cared about selling the idea that there's more mountains, rocks, and space, etc. for the players who are at the portal room, and not the players who are actually engaged in what we would call the normal part of the map. It's so weird to me. It's so fascinating to me that this decision was made, and I kind of love it. I kind of love that this is the thing that we can find if we just take a scalpel to these Marvel Rivals maps. A two-dimensional, one-sided piece of art designed with intentional, literal smoke and mirrors to keep the player guessing and to make them think that they're looking at a repeated structure, grant you, but a three-dimensional structure of a rock in this map. I don't know. If you guys find this stuff as interesting and as enjoyable as I do, let me know by subscribing. Bless your faces, and deuces.